Oklahoma State has been a strange team over the last couple of years. They've been very streaky. Like if you go back to last year, and we're going to go in depth on this a little bit here in a second, but you go back to last year, they lost two of their first four games. I mean, it looked horrendous. They lost to South Alabama and Iowa State, two teams that weren't very good at all. Then they went on and to win a whole bunch of games. I think they only lost one more game in the regular season. That was to Central Florida, and then they ended up losing in the Big 12 title game. But so just like absolutely terrible the first 5, 6, or 4 or 5 games of the season. Really, really good the back half of the season last year. You go back to the year before in 2022, and it was the exact opposite. They won 6 of their first 7 games. The year before, they were red hot first half of the season. Second half of the season, they lost 5 of 6. Now, sometimes when that happens, you can chalk it up to scheduling, like the schedule was backloaded or front loaded. You know, you played all your tough games first or all your tough games in the back. But that hasn't been the case with Oklahoma State. I mean, like last year, you're losing to teams like South Alabama and Iowa State, two teams that weren't very good, then beating teams like Oklahoma in the second half of the season. It's just very weird, very streaky. But we're going to talk about Oklahoma State today. It's time for another preview and prediction video. A game-by-game prediction. Up today is the Oklahoma State Cowboys out of the Big 12. A newly shaped Big 12. Texas and Oklahoma, of course, gone off to the SEC. And in come Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado to join the previous year's editions of Houston, Central Florida, BYU, and Cincinnati. So the Big 12 has been a mess, really, the last couple of years, trying to keep up with who's coming, who's going, who's in there, who's not. And we're going to do our best today to figure out Oklahoma State and how they might do in 2024. Now would be another great time to just throw this out there. Who's better, Gundy at Oklahoma State or Whittingham at Utah? I do these coaching ranking videos pretty much every season, ranking coaches within all the different conferences. And probably the most debated ranking that I did out of all the conferences this year came down to Gundy and Whittingham between Utah and Oklahoma State. You can click back and watch my ranking videos on the Big 12 to hear more of my thoughts on that. But I'm curious what you think. Just who do you think is better, regardless of who you're a fan of? Would you rather have Gundy or would you rather have Whittingham at Utah? They are surprisingly close. Their winning percentage is almost identical. It's a little freaky how close they are when you start comparing. But anyway, who's better between the two? You can let me know. I'm going to skip to something I normally do later in the video and throw this out right up front. The Vegas win total for Oklahoma State this season is 7.5. This is the most shocking win total I've come across yet in all of these prediction videos. If Oklahoma State doesn't win more than 7.5 games, something is drastically wrong. And we'll get into why that is. We'll get into it now. We'll start with the offense. We're going to take a look at that. Then we're going to look at the defense, returning production, some Vegas odds, things like that. Then I'm going to throw the schedule up on the screen. But I just want you to keep in mind as I start talking here that I'm talking about a team that is predicted to win 7.5 games. The over-under win total 7.5. On offense, Ollie Gordon returns on offense. You probably know that name. In fact, if you only know one player from Oklahoma State, that's probably who you know. He kind of broke onto the scene last year as one of the best running backs in college football. He ran for over 1,700 yards and 21 touchdowns, a Heisman contender. He is a Heisman favorite heading into 2024. In fact, in terms of running backs, he's probably on the top of the list. Now, some other names jump out at the running back position when you start talking about Heisman, right? You got a couple at Ohio State, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Well, that's the problem. There's 2 of them, right? They're going to split a lot of carries up there. Ollie Gordon is an old school workhorse running back. He gets 20 carries a game. That just doesn't happen very often anymore in the world of college football. More often than not, teams have 2 starting running backs. It's like a 1A, 1B thing. And they just rotate them in and out. And not that Oklahoma State doesn't have other running backs that they put into the game, but Ollie Gordon is their primary workhorse. I would be surprised if he doesn't lead the country in rush yards as a running back this year. Again, whether you think he's the best running back or not is a separate debate from that, right? You might think Quinshon Judkins is better, but if Quinshon Judkins is getting 8 carries a game and Travion Henderson is getting 9 carries a game, and Ollie Gordon's getting 20 carries a game, who's going to have more yards? It's going to be Ollie Gordon, right? So that's what I mean. I think I would be surprised if he doesn't lead the country in rushing, and he'll be in a lot of people's Heisman conversations, especially if Oklahoma State can put together a good season. But he's their superstar player. He's the one player on that team that literally almost every college football fan knows. Here's some things you might not know. Oklahoma has a quarterback returning, Bowman. It's his 7th year. Now, luckily, we're getting to the end of all this where people got extra years added for the COVID year in 2020 and things like that. But there are still some players hanging around, and Oklahoma State has a ton of them who've been in college for a really long time. 7th year quarterback. So, again, is he a Heisman? No. Is he going to throw for 5,000 yards? No. Will he play in the NFL? Probably not. But he's been playing college football for 7 years. He's going to be pretty good this year, okay? The offensive line, they have 6 offensive linemen that are super seniors. That means they are 6th year, six offensive linemen that have been there for 6 years. Again, thanks to the extra eligibility provided by the COVID year. They have a 7th offensive lineman who's been there 5 years. By far and away, and nobody else even comes close. This is the most experienced offensive line in all of college football. Combine that with the talents of Ollie Gordon, and this is going to be a dangerous running attack here for Oklahoma State. At the wide receiver position, no real superstars, but they get Presley and Owens back. There's a lot of different options at the outside. Again, a lot of returning starters and returning contributors from last year's team. But let's be real. Offense wasn't really the issue with Oklahoma State last year. Their defense was beyond bad. It was horrendous. Now, the good news, on one hand, you get 10 starters back from that defense. But that's a two-edged sword. That's a double-edged sword, right? It's great to have returning starters. They provide experience and leadership and things like that. But when your defense is that bad, do you really want that many of them back? I don't know. We're going to find out how much, if at all, better Oklahoma State's defense can get in 2024. But if they even play a little bit better, Oklahoma State is going to sail past that 7.5 win mark. They were ranked 86th in the country last year in scoring defense, so they give up a ton of points. They're absolutely terrible against the pass, 111th in the country in pass efficiency. And here's the problem. Well, that is the problem, but the reasons for that problem. They're not very good on the back end. How do you make that up? By being good up front, getting pressure on the quarterback. They're not good there either. In fact, the defensive line is, in my opinion, is probably the weakest point of this defense, which is pretty weak overall. You know, some teams might be a little bit below average in the secondary, but they have an elite pass rush, or at least an above average pass rush, and that's able to kind of cover up some of their mistakes on the back end. For some teams, the opposite is true. Maybe they've got a couple of lockdown DBs. So even though they don't have a great pass rush and the quarterback's got a lot of time to sit in the pocket, because the secondary is so good and can lock the receivers down, there's nowhere for the quarterback to go with the ball. Oklahoma State had neither of that last year. They weren't very good in the secondary, and they weren't very good at getting to the quarterback either. So just not a recipe for success. So ideally, they would want to improve in the back end and up front. It's a must that they improve in one or the other. They do have a couple of linebackers that I liked from last year that are back, but overall, this defense was a serious problem last year. It's a serious concern, I think, heading into 2024, and it definitely needs to play a whole lot better. Returning production is a number that we've been looking at for almost every team when it comes to doing these preview and game-by-game prediction videos. They're the fourth. They're ranked fourth. In terms of returning production, they're fourth in the country. So only 3 teams in the country return more production from last year than Oklahoma State. And again, we just talked about a lot of the reasons why that is, with the 6 super senior offensive linemen, a 7th-year quarterback, Ollie Gordon returns, who's their primary weapon offensively, and then 10 starters back on defense. So even though that defense wasn't great, over half the production that they got out of their defense last year returns again for 2024. This is one of the most veteran teams in the country, with one of the most veteran head coaches in the country, in Gundy, in a conference that just lost its 2 biggest bullies on the block in Texas and Oklahoma. The conference is wide open. Do I think that Oklahoma State is a team that could go on to win a national title this year? No. In fact, Even if they win the Big 12, I'd be shocked if they win a single playoff game. And I'll kind of tell you why that is here in a second. But anyway, they're fourth in return in production. The Vegas win total of 7.5, I think, is ridiculously low. Ridiculously low. Let's go ahead and put the schedule up. Here it is. Vegas has them picked to finish third in the Big 12 behind Utah and Kansas State. And they play both of those teams on this schedule here in the regular season. Now, I'm going to try to remember to get back to the playoff discussion, but let's go through the schedule here. But I want to talk about why I'm going to appear high on Oklahoma State in this video. I don't think they'll win a single playoff game, even if they make the playoffs. But let's go through the schedule here, and then I'll kind of circle back around to some of the playoff talk as it relates to Oklahoma State. They start off at home, couple of games at home here, South Dakota State and Arkansas out of the SEC. I think they'll beat South Dakota State. Now, here's the thing. They can't lose this. And you're going to say, well, there's no way they lose. They lost this very game last year to South Alabama, and a game early in the year against a nobody. Nobody will watch this game. The game probably won't even be on TV, right? You'll wake up Sunday morning, you'll be scrolling through whatever you scroll through, and you'll see that Oklahoma State lost to some team you never heard of. That can't happen. I don't think it will happen, but that cannot happen. If it does, forget everything else I'm about to say in this video, but I think Oklahoma State gets the win at home against South Dakota State. Then Arkansas comes to town. I think Arkansas is in for a rough year this year. I know they bought Bobby Petrino in, but look, Bobby Petrino isn't some sort of savior that drops down from heaven to rescue a terrible offense or football program. He was brought in to try to do that last year with Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M. Anybody tell me where Jimbo Fisher is right now? Yeah, he's in the unemployment line. He was fired. It didn't work. And that's with a team at Texas A&M way more talented than what he's going to have to work with at Arkansas. I'm not here to pile on Arkansas. Got no reason to hate Arkansas. A shout out Sam Pittman. This may be his last year. It just hasn't worked there as a head coach for Pittman. He's one of the nicest guys in football. He's a hell of an offensive line coach and a pretty good recruiter. Hasn't worked as head coach. I don't think it's going to work this year. And I just think Oklahoma State's a better team than Arkansas. I think Oklahoma State gets the win over SEC opponent Arkansas. They're 2-0. Then another non-con game, but this one on the road against an in-state group of 5 team, Tulsa. Again, you have to win this game if you're Oklahoma State. It's not going to do a whole lot of good to go 9-3 if one of those 3 losses is against Tulsa. It's not. It will work against you when the playoff committee is sitting in that room in the beginning of December. If you're losing early in the season to teams like Tulsa and South Dakota State, it just will. Especially if you're looking at an at-large situation where the committee is trying to decide between, let's say, a 9-3 or even 10-2 Oklahoma State that has a loss to Tulsa versus a 9-3 SEC team that has 3 losses to 3 top 10 SEC teams. Who do you think is going to get the nod? You can't lose these games. I don't think they will. I've got them starting 3-0. And then in back-to-back weeks, you play what I think are the 2 toughest and most important games on the schedule, home against Utah and on the road at Kansas State. Those 2 teams are the Vegas favorites to win the Big 12. Utah is 1, Kansas State is 2, Oklahoma State is 3. Utah at home, followed up by Kansas State on the road. I'm kind of taking the easy way out here. I think Oklahoma State is a good enough, a talented enough, an experienced and veteran-led enough team with an experienced enough coaching staff to beat those 2 teams or to beat either one of them. I don't know that they're good enough to beat both of those teams in 2 weeks in a row, especially considering one of them is on the road. So I kind of took the easy way out here, and I'm splitting the difference. I'm giving you a win at home over Utah, which would be a huge win. A win over Utah at home would put Oklahoma State in the driver's seat to make the Big 12 title game, because they would have a win over Utah State, so they would own a tiebreaker over Utah State. They would have a win over Utah, which means they would own a tiebreaker over Utah. So should it come down to that at the end of the regular season in terms of pitting the Big 12 championship game, that would be a check mark in a plus column for Oklahoma State. You follow that up with a game on the road at Kansas State, another team that I'm extremely high on. I really like that quarterback they have there. Another team that's really well coached. These are 3 of the best coached teams in the country. Forget the Big 12. You're talking Oklahoma State, Utah, and Kansas State here. I think you beat Utah and lose to Kansas State. I admit I'm taking the easy way out here by kind of splitting those two. I'm giving you the win at home and a loss on the road. Could you lose to Utah? Of course. Utah's a very good team. They're a veteran team as well. Cameron Rising back at quarterback. The tight end is back. They've got one of the best defenses, probably the best defense in the Big 12. That is not going to be an easy game, but you get it at home. It's early in the year. Health shouldn't be that big of a concern this early in the year for either team. I'm giving you a win against Utah and a loss against Kansas State. So you can take that any way you want. After the first 5 games of the season, I've got you at 4-1. You then host West Virginia. So it's not really getting any easier. In terms of the Big 12, this is one of the toughest 3-game stretches you could possibly draw. Utah, Kansas State, and West Virginia. Yes, West Virginia was one of the better teams in the Big 12 last year, winning, I think, 8 games, a surprise season for them. They're trying to keep it going this year. Was last year just an aberration for Neil Brown at West Virginia, and he reverts back to his old ways of 4 or 5 win seasons? Or was last year an indication that they figured something out there in Morgantown? You catch a break by getting West Virginia at home. That's a tough place to play up there in Morgantown. I've got you beating West Virginia. You're still just 1 loss heading into your first bye week. Of course, everybody gets 2 bye weeks this year because there's an extra Saturday between Labor Day and the first Saturday in December when they play conference championship games. So we've been over that before. So you get 2 bye weeks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-1 through the first half of the season. The 1 loss on the road at Kansas State, a team that I think is one of the best teams in the Big 12. Nothing to hold your head down about there. Second half of the season starts with a couple of back-to-back road games here. That's the bad news. Good news, they're against 2 of the worst teams in the Big 12, BYU and Baylor. I think you beat them both. You know, I'm very opinionated on this channel, and rarely do I straddle fences. I usually come down really hard on one side or the other of whatever topic or issue or conversation it is that we're talking about. And when it comes to Baylor, I may end up having to admit I was wrong. I was very high on Dave Aranda. Very high. I don't know if I got tainted from what he did at LSU in 2019. I don't know what. I don't know. But I was very high on Dave Aranda. I thought he was going to take over at Baylor, and especially with Texas and Oklahoma getting ready to head out, I thought Baylor was a team to watch out for to sort of ascend to the top of the Big 12. They've been an absolute disaster so far under Dave Aranda. There's just no other way to describe it. It has been really, really bad. This could be his last chance to get it turned around this season there. There's a lot of people that have kind of seen enough when it comes to Dave Aranda. I may end up having to admit I was wrong there. BYU, they're picked to finish last in the Big 12 this year. Not a very good team. Maybe that's a little bit of a difficult road trip to make there out to Utah to play BYU, but I think you get the win there and at Baylor. So you come out of that bye week and you get 2 big back-to-back wins. Big because they're both on the road. A road game is obviously harder than a home game, right? Back-to-back road games becomes infinitely harder. But I still think you get the job done against, if you got to play back-to-back road games, these are 2 pretty good teams to have to play them against here. I think you get the win in both of them. You come back home, you play Arizona State. This is another team that I'm not expecting that much out of this year, a team new to the Big 12, of course, coming out of the Pac-12 after they folded last year. But it's just been a long time since they've been any good at all. Herm Edwards ran that place into the ground. I like the coach they have there. I'm not convinced he'll ever get Arizona State to where I think Arizona State should be. I've long said there are 3 states in this country that haven't produced winning football programs, and there's no excuse that they can't have at least one. Arizona is one of those states. North Carolina and Virginia are the others, right? Either Arizona or Arizona State should be a competitive football program. I'm talking a top 15 or top 20 program. One of them should be. There should be one school in North Carolina that can consistently be in the top 15 or top 20, whether it's North Carolina or NC State or wherever it is. And then one of the Virginia schools, Virginia or Virginia Tech. And we just haven't seen that out of any schools in those states in a long, long time. I know North Carolina had a couple of good years in the top 20, and NC State bounces in and out of the top 20 sometimes. But and not Virginia Tech's looking to kind of maybe turn a corner this year. Arizona had a good year last year. So it's not that nobody from those states ever has a good year, but those states in particular produce enough high school talent There's schools in those states that have some tradition. Virginia Tech, was a dominant program back in the late 90s and early 2000s. We've seen the Arizona schools be good before. There's no reason one of the schools in each of those states can't become a consistently top 20 team. It just hasn't happened. I don't expect it to happen for Arizona State. I think Oklahoma State gets an easy win at home over them. And then you've got the game where maybe you scratch your head afterwards. It's on the road at TCU, and I think Oklahoma State catches a loss here. This is just a tricky portion of the schedule. You come out of a bye week, you're on top of the world. If you're sitting at 5-1 like I've got you after that bye week with only a loss to Kansas State, having a win over Utah, which is going to be huge at the end of the season when you look at tiebreakers, then you come out of that, and 3 out of your next 4 games are on the road. That's tough. Now, none of them are against really good teams. I don't think BYU or Baylor is very good. I don't think Arizona State is very good. And TCU, I don't think they're going to be as bad as last year, but I don't think they're going to be anything close to what they were in 2022 either. I think Oklahoma State is better than all 4 of those teams that they play in between their 2 bye weeks. But 3 of those 4 are on the road, and I've just been watching college football a long time. It's hard for me to imagine Oklahoma State winning all 4 of those games, considering 3 out of the 4 are on the road. TCU became the most likely loss in my mind, so I've got you losing on the road at TCU. You then get your second bye week. You come out of that. You host Texas Tech. Texas Tech's another team that disappointed me last year. Some people picked them to possibly contend to win the Big 12. They didn't even come close. They had a disappointing season. Again, another team looking to turn it around this year. Maybe they're a little bit better this year. I don't think they're beating a veteran Oklahoma State. I've got you getting a win at home over the Red Raiders. And then the final game of the regular season on the road at Colorado. I think Colorado is going to be a team like last year that gets worse as the season goes along. I don't think they handle the scrutiny well once the season starts. They love the lights and the cameras and the microphones in the offseason when they can do the hey, look at me routine and make everybody go to a little Wayne concert and post their little TikToks and Instagram reels and all that bullshit. But when the season starts and things actually matter and things don't go well, they don't handle it very well there. On top of that, they don't have a very deep roster. Now, they've got some elite players at the top of their roster. Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter. Well, I guess that's about it. Well, no, I don't want to say that. They've got a couple of good wide receivers, too. It really hurts them to lose that running back, Dylan Edwards. Their offensive line, they might have 4 or 5 offensive linemen that are good, but if anything happens to any of them, they've got nothing behind it. And the later a season goes on, the more attrition and depth matter. Colorado doesn't have that. You get them at the end of the year. They're going to be sitting, in my opinion, on at least 6 or 7 losses before this game is ever played. Shedeur Sanders is going to have one eye towards the NFL. Deion Sanders is going to have one eye towards whatever grift he's going to move on to next after Colorado. And I think you get a win on the road in Boulder. I've got Oklahoma State going 10-2. I cannot believe for the life of me that Vegas has this team at 7.5. I can't imagine a team with this much returning production. A Heisman caliber running back, 6 offensive linemen who have been in college for 6 years. I know the defense is bad, and I don't have a lot of hope or faith that somehow they're going to figure something out defensively and have a top 5 or top 10 defense. But my God, it's not like this is a brutal schedule here. How many of these teams do you think are going to be ranked when the game is played? South Dakota State? No. Arkansas? No. Tulsa? No. Utah and Kansas State, yes. West Virginia, maybe. That's a pot 50-50, maybe. So 2 or 3 ranked teams in the first half of the schedule. But what about the second half of the schedule? Is BYU ever going to be ranked this year? No. Is Baylor? No. Is Arizona State? No. TCU? No. Texas Tech? Maybe. Less of a chance than West Virginia. Colorado? No. No. You got 2, maybe 3 ranked teams on here. Even if you lose to all 3 of them, you're sitting there at 9-3, and depending on how everything else goes, you could still get into the Big 12 title game at 9-3. Now, I wouldn't count on that. I think 10-2 definitely gets you in. 11-1 for sure, but 10-2 most likely gets you in as well. And look, we have to change the way we think about the playoffs. Do I think Oklahoma State is one of the best 10 teams in the country? No. I can name 10 teams off the top of my head right now. I wouldn't even have to think about it. I would pick to beat Oklahoma State. That's not the point. The winner of the Big 12 is going to the playoffs. Period. End of story. That's it. It doesn't matter what else happens in the world of college football. Whoever wins the Big 12 title game, not only are they going to the playoffs, they get a first round bye. You're telling me after what I've told you about their roster and Ollie Gordon and all this returning experience on offense and Gundy been a coach forever and seeing this schedule, you think it's completely out of the realm of possibility that they win the Big 12? I agree with you. I think Utah and Kansas State are better. I do think it's more likely that Utah and Kansas State win the Big 12. I think that is more likely. But the most likely thing isn't what always happens. That's why we love college football. I would not be shocked at all, to see Oklahoma State with a 4 seed in the playoffs if they win the Big 12. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means they don't have to play. That means they don't have to play in the first round. That's good. Who do they play in the second round? Well, this is where it gets bad. They play the winner of the 5 seed versus 12 seed. Well, who's going to be the 12 seed? Liberty, Boise State, App State, Memphis, whatever, right? The group of 5, because there's a guaranteed spot. They're going to be 12. Who's going to be the 5 seed? Probably the second best SEC team. Okay. Let's say for the sake of argument, it's Texas. Oklahoma State's not beating Texas. Let's say the second best SEC team is Alabama. This Oklahoma State team's not beating Bama. Let's say it's Georgia. They're not beating Georgia. Let's say it's Ole Miss. They're not beating Ole Miss. So Oklahoma State's got a chance to have a really great season, potentially even win the Big 12. And if they do, they will be in the playoffs guaranteed with a bye. My guess would be the 4 seed, meaning they would play the winner of the 5 versus 12, and they would lose. But nevertheless, that's my thoughts on Oklahoma State. Am I completely delusional here? Am I the only one that's looking at Ollie Gordon, these offensive linemen, Gundy as a coach, no Texas and Oklahoma to worry about, and then this schedule, and going, yeah, they could win the Big 12. Am I the only one saying that? Because again, I'll remind you, Vegas has this team at 7.5 wins. To go under that means they got to go 7-5. Where's the 5 losses? Let's say they lose to Arkansas. I don't see that happening, but let's say they lose to Arkansas, Utah, Kansas State, West Virginia. That would be 4. Which team are they losing to in the back half of the schedule? I've got them losing to TCU, Colorado. I don't know. I don't see it. Give me over 7.5 wins for Oklahoma State. I've got them at 10-2 and maybe a trip to the Big 12 title game. We'll see. Be sure and let me know down below how stupid I am, and have a good morning.